The first pattern we looked at was star 442, which was good and bad. It's good because it's a common pattern, there's lots of examples, but bad because I think it's actually more complicated than the two patterns we're going to look at today. So it might have given a bad impression for how complicated these 12 patterns are going to be. The two we're going to look at today will complete the first of the three families we're going to look at. They're nicknamed the reflecting reds because these three types of floor patterns are the only three you can make in Minecraft that use reflectional symmetry, but no rotational symmetry. So y'all remember that the star 442 pattern, its like fundamental region is a triangle, and the three corners each have 4 lines of reflective symmetry, 4 lines of reflective symmetry, and 2 lines, so hence the name star 442. So you could probably guess that star 2222 is very similar. Its fundamental region is a rectangle, and each corner has 2 lines of reflective symmetry passing through it. By the way, woodworking is one of my other hobbies, and I got a really bad cut yesterday, so so I have to use my ring finger and thumb to control all the movement keys. This is not a pretty pattern, but it shows the idea is that you create your rectangle, you throw in whatever blocks you want, and then you just keep reflecting it over the edges marked in red here. And you can fill an entire floor with that. So here's the same pattern, but just with the red lines removed. So there is one thing we got to talk about in this episode, and that's accidentally making different floor patterns. So if you're trying to make the star quadruple 2 pattern, you can use a square shape as your fundamental region, but if you accidentally make a square that has diagonal reflective symmetry, you've actually just created star 442 on accident. Similarly, if your fundamental rectangle has spin symmetry, so this rectangle, if you spin it 180 degrees, looks the same. In this case, you would have accidentally created 2 star 22, another one of the 12 patterns. Don't worry about the names for now. We'll lay them all out side by side and make it super clear which is which later on. Anyways, I think this right here is my favorite star quad 2 pattern. This was made with a 4x4 grid that I filled in with campfires, grindstones, anvils, and bells. I really like how it has 3D texture to it, but that you can still see the symmetry of it. So I went for those 4 blocks because, they all have nice 3D texture. But additionally, they all have left, right, and up, down mirror symmetry. So if you're going to make a star quad 2 pattern, the blocks you use, you have to be able to create their mirror image, which is easy if they already are their mirror image. We can do a really quick example here. So you could use, what is this, the magenta terracotta that everyone hates? Oh man, I can't build this, man. We got to work with what I've already built. One weird thing about star quad 2 that was similar to star 442 is you can have a primitive region, a primitive rectangle that's smaller than a single block. So if you just have a grid of end gateways, the top surface has star quad 2 symmetry. And the primitive rectangle for that symmetry, it'd be a square actually. It'd be from the middle of the end gateway down to the bottom, from the bottom to the corner, corner up halfway to on the side, and then from the side back to the middle. And you could imagine that little square being reflected over and over, and that's what would create this pattern. And you can do more complex patterns with end gateways and some of the trapdoors. But what gets really fun is when you go to glazed terracotta again, and now you can have diagonal rectangles creating the pattern. So here, the fundamental rectangle is kind of like a 1x2 rectangle, but diagonal. So the 4 reinforced deep slate blocks here mark the 4 corners. The corners are in the middle of the deep slate block. So you can imagine a line extending right down the reflective symmetry of the glazed terracotta and over to the other reinforced deep slate. End gateways and reinforced deep slate turn out to actually be really nice for floor patterns. So we got to get Psycraft on the production of some of these. So if you take this fundamental rectangle, and then here I've just reflected it 4 times. And then if you keep reflecting that over and over again, you get this pattern. And then you can kind of see where the lines of reflection are. They're pretty much in line with the deep slate. So 1 line of reflection here, another line of reflection there, and then we have 2 more sets. So one that goes through the little silver dinner plates here, and then another one that goes through the red gears. Here's another primitive rectangle you can use. So, this is with yellow glazed terracotta. I threw a white block in there just because, and the corners are marked with yellow concrete. there's 4 of that rectangle reflected, and then here's a bunch of it. Yeah, star quad 2 patterns are pretty cool. Just like how there were an endless number of possibilities with star 442, there's an endless number with star quad 2 also. And then the last pattern we're going to look at this video is just called star star. It's kind of a funny name. The stars refer to reflective symmetry because, you know, an asterisk itself kind of has reflective symmetry. So for star star, you have a rectangle as your primitive area, and 2 opposite sides are reflectively symmetric, but the other 2 sides aren't. So instead of reflecting the pattern, you just kind of shift it upwards. Like before, if you make a pattern here that has rotational symmetry or a reflective symmetry that you didn't intend, you'll end up with a different kind of floor pattern instead of star star. So here's a bunch of that rectangle, and then here's the same thing without the symmetry lines highlighted. One of the easiest ways to make this pattern is to just take a glazed terracotta and then kind of checkerboard it with a block that has 4 lines of reflective symmetry through it. So there's 2 kinds of reflection in here, one that goes straight down the deep slate and another that goes straight down the glazed terracotta. Sure enough, we have those 2 types of lines of reflective symmetry in these patterns and no others, and we don't have rotational symmetry either. It's called star star because each of the stars stands for one of the 2 lines of reflective symmetry. So you could call it like star 1, but I think star star is a better name. So here's another example of star star that's on a diagonal rectangle. So the long sides here mark reflectional symmetry, and the short sides mark just where you slide it to. If you look this stuff up outside the video, this kind of symmetry where like you slide something up is called translational symmetry. Yep, and so then here's 2 copies of that rectangle just reflected left to right. And then when we keep translating and reflecting, here's the pattern we get. So you can see a line of reflection goes right down these red gears here, and then a second line of reflection goes up through these kind of like dinner plate shapes. And that's pretty much it. It's still a very symmetric pattern, but you can see like there's no lines of reflection in this direction. Easy way to prove that to yourself is to look at the dinner plates here. They have a little red like blotch of ketchup on just their right side. And if you were to, you know, do any other kind of mirror symmetry, that blotch of ketchup would move to a different spot on the plate. But if you have a line of reflective symmetry that goes right down the middle of the ketchup, then it'll leave the ketchup in place and it's still a perfectly good symmetry. One other cool trick I didn't realize with this floor pattern is that bells actually like have a render distance to them shorter than your normal render distance. So a certain distance away, they'll start disappearing, and you can get a little circle of bells that follows you around as you fly above the pattern. So those are the 3 reflecting red patterns. If you want a couple memory tricks to keep track of which is which, you can use the numbers in the name to kind of tell you how symmetric it is. So star star is the least symmetric out of the 3 of them. Star 442 is the most symmetric, and then star quadruple 2 is halfway in between. In fact, if you look at the star 442 grid from last episode, if you imagine removing all the diagonal lines out of it, you now have the star quadruple 2 grid, which is just a square grid. And then if you say remove all of the horizontal red lines and all of the diagonal lines, so all you have is vertical reflective lines, now you have the star star pattern. And then my favorite way to remember the differences between these 3 are to try to use them to remember what direction north is. In this world, north is that way. But if you were dropped into a Minecraft world where this was the floor everywhere, you couldn't remember which way north was using the floor, because, you know, if you spin and face the other way, it still looks the same. If you spin this way, the floor still looks the same. You'd have to either punch out a shape in the floor or use something other than the floor, like the sun. So for star quadruple 2, it's a little better. So if you were dropped into a world where the whole floor was star quadruple 2, and you were told that north is that way, well, you could remember it by looking down at this dinner plate diagonal and remembering that looking slightly to the right gives you north, which is great. But if you run around a lot, you get lost. That same instruction, looking down the diagonal and then turning slightly to the right, will also point you south. And then lastly, for star star, if you're told, you know, that direction's north, you're dropped into a world, this is the only floor everywhere, maybe you can't break it. Here, you could just remember that if you stand on the red gear, look towards the gray plate, and turn right, you get north. And then any block you choose and follow those rules, it'll point you to north. So star star, you can remember north. star quadruple 2, you can only remember if north is one of two directions. And then with star 442, you can't use it to track north at all. That's it for the reflecting reds. My name's Chris. Thanks for watching.